You know that feeling when you upgrade your setup and everything just clicks? That's what a good monitor does. The colors just pop, motions feel much smoother, and suddenly your games, your work, and well, everything just looks incredible. And the best part is, monitors in 2025 have come a long way. There's so many amazing new tech out there like HDR, OLED, mini LEDs, high refresh rates, adaptive sync. I can go on forever. And when you know what you're looking for, you can pick something that fits you perfectly. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down what really matters when choosing a monitor, what's worth it, what's just is basically marketing, and how to find that perfect balance of performance, visuals, and well, a bit of a comfort. I'm Aria, this is AZM Lab, and let's find a monitor that makes your setup shine. Let's start with the main one, the panel itself. You mostly see three main types: IPS, VA, and OLED. And for me, what I like to call the safe option or jack of all trades is IPS, because over the years, IPS panels have come a long way. With modern panels, you get accurate colors, excellent viewing angles, and fast enough response time for almost any kind of gaming. Now, you might be thinking, so IPS is the way to go, right? Well, kind of, because there are a few trade-offs. Blacks are never truly black. They look more like deep gray in dark rooms. Brightness is decent, but HDR performance usually falls short on mini LED or OLEDs. Still though, for most people who mix gaming, productivity, and everyday use, IPS is the safest and the most balanced choice, especially as a secondary display where you got a lot of static content. I always recommend my friends to go for an IPS panel. Now, the other kind of very popular and common option are VA panels. And they used to be the contrast kings, darker blacks, punchier highlights, and great depth for movies and single player games. And with modern VA panels, especially those from Samsung, there have been a lot of improvements in terms of response time. Ghosting isn't the problem it used to be, where you get that kind of shadow following characters and that sort of thing, in case if you don't know. However, color accuracy still tends to fall slightly behind IPS, or I should say quite a bit, frankly. And viewing angles due to the technologies aren't very good at all. So for me, as of today, VA really only makes sense if you're getting a big discount, you're on a very tight budget, or you specifically want that deep black cinematic look for an immersive gaming. Otherwise, modern IPS panels have caught up enough that you wouldn't lose that much in terms of the tech itself and the options. And if the budget is not as much of an issue, considering how OLED have also dropped in pricing, OLED will always look better and will give you a lot better experience overall in comparison to VA. But before I kind of delve in a little bit more about OLED, let's clear up something about sort of VA and IPS and in terms of the tech that you might kind of see the advertisement for. And that's LED and mini LED. A mini LED is essentially a premium evolution on a standard LED backlighting. It's not a new panel type, it's what I like to call a smarter, a more precise way of lighting the screen. Regular LED monitors, whether IPS or VA, use a lot larger kind of lightning zone behind the panel. That's why in dark scenes, black kind of look grayish, and the bright object can cause that faint halo known as blooming when there's like this white circle around it. It's annoying, let's just say. With mini LEDs, this gets fixed in most cases, and that is because of thousands of microscopic LEDs divided into hundreds of local dimming zones that brighten or dim independently. That gives you that deeper contrast, stronger HDR, and much more realistic brightness. And especially if you pair it with an IPS, you get an accurate color with wide viewing angles plus a major boost in contrast and HDR. With VA as well, it does enhances the panel's natural strength, darker blacks, deeper shadows, and cinematic feeling that is much better and closer to OLED, though VA still reacts slightly slower in fast-paced motions, and color accuracy is not perfect. But the thing with mini LEDs is they are pricier because of the complexities behind the build, the thousands of mini LEDs, the heat management and advanced dimming controls, all kind of add up the cost. But you are paying for visible results, brighter images, cleaner contrast, and near OLED quality without the burn-in risk or brightness loss over time. In short, mini LEDs will give you the best of both worlds, almost OLED-like visuals, but with LED reliability. Now, speaking of OLED, let's just address this because a lot of people say OLED always, and they're not wrong. Because when it comes to picture quality, OLED still is the most stunning option out there. Every pixel light itself, which means perfect blacks, infinite contrast, and that silky smooth motion that makes everything look alive. Whether you're gaming or watching films, OLED will deliver that wow factor without a doubt. Deep shadows, punchy highlights, and colors that feel like, how shall I put it? They're glowing from within. But OLED isn't perfect because there are no backlights. Overall brightness is lower than mini LEDs, especially in bright rooms. That is gonna be a problem. Text and fine details can look a bit softer and they can get very annoying, which makes OLED also less ideal for hours of office work. And since each pixel ages individually, leaving the same image on screen for hours like a taskbar or a game HUD can cause image retention or in rare cases burning. And in case if you're wondering what is that terminology burning, it is essentially an image will stay on your screen permanently like a shadow. It is unbelievably annoying and you don't want it to happen. That said though, modern OLEDs include built-in protections like pixel shifting, refresh cycles, brightness limiting. Brands like LG and Asus and Alienware now even cover burning under warranty. But you also got to bear in mind, there are also, with OLEDs, there are two main types as well. And that does affect the decision making. One is called WOLED and one is called QD OLED. Both look incredible, but work differently. With WOLED used by LG and many TVs, they use it kind of this technology when a white OLED base with color filters for red, green, and blue. It's bright, efficient, very reliable, a balanced choice, shall we say, for gaming and everyday use. Whereas with QD OLED, developed by Samsung, it skips color filters completely, starts with blue OLED pixels and then use these quantum dots to create red and green directly. This lets modern, more light through and gives a more richer colors, better HDR, and slightly higher brightness. It also spreads the color more evenly across pixels, reducing that burn-in risk even further, which is really, really important. But QD OLEDs cost more because of their complex manufacturing and new materials, but the picture quality speaks for itself. Vivid colors, amazing contrast, and that high-end HDR depths that looks more premium. So, if you want the best possible image, QD OLED is the one. If you want something balanced and a bit more affordable, WOLED is still a fantastic choice. Now, The next big thing that you should always look for are resolution and size, because honestly, one doesn't mean much without the other. And for those of you that don't know, resolution is basically how many pixels your screen has. Those tiny dots that make up every image. And the more pixels you got, the sharper and more details everything will look. But here's the catch. The higher the resolution is, the harder your GPU has to work to push all those pixels. So getting the right balance between your monitor and your hardware is key. Now, I'll be straight with you. In 2025, 1080p still has its place, mainly for esports or if you're working with a limited budget. It is easy to run, it gives you a great frame rate, and for fast-paced shooters, it still is fantastic. But in my personal opinion, if you got a powerful GPU that's come out in the last 5-6 years, or you just care about image quality, 1080p really shows its age now. Text will look chunkier, details feel soft, and once you kind of see a higher resolution, it will be hard to go back. And that's why for me, 1440p is the real spot that you should be aiming for. It is the perfect middle ground between getting a very sharp enough image that looks crystal clear, but still is light enough on your GPU to hit that smooth frame rates. And especially for most kind of office designs and more gaming setups, 27 to 28 inches is about the standard, and 1440p, it just feels right for that. You get the detail, workspace, and clarity without pushing your system too hard. And whether you're gaming, editing, or doing productivity work, trust me, it is a great balance. There is also 4K, which, don't get me wrong, looks incredible. Oh my god, I've had a 4K screen. They are amazing. But only if you go big. And I'm talking about at least 32 inches or more. And that's when 4K really shines. Because if you go smaller, you struggle to even notice that extra sharpness unless you're really kind of sitting right up close. And you'll be putting a lot more pressure on your graphics card. Especially when it comes to gaming, it will make a huge difference. But for creative work, video editing, or color grading, 4K is amazing. It gives you that insane detail, space to kind of scale down later, but in games, the performance cost can be huge in terms of frame rates and everything. It is night and day. And especially if you're running multiple displays, it will be a significant cost to your GPU, and you will need to have a really, really beefy system at that stage. And here's one that I see all the time that I've had friends and family kind of ask me, why not buy a 4K monitor just to then run it at 1440p? And all I would say is don't. It really is not worth it. When you drop a resolution like that, the monitor has to stretch the image to fit all those pixels, and that usually softens everything. It looks a bit blurrier, not sharper. And if you want 1440p performance, just buy a native 1440p display. It will look cleaner and your system will thank you. And it's a lot cheaper. And one last thing, guys, when it comes to displays and sizes, always bear in mind the distance, because that matters. As I said, the size and the pixels do have an effect, but also the distance that you've got as well. What you don't want to do is have yourself a big screen and having to constantly scan across the screen, because that's what it will feel like. And it will get tiring, and it will have a huge effect, and I mean huge effect in terms of comfort, in terms of the overall experience that you get, and it's just not worth it. It's much better to get that lower resolution and the better balance than the bigger screen and a worse experience. Now, when it comes to refresh rates, you will see all sorts of numbers out there, 240 Hz, 360 Hz, even higher now. But here's the truth. If your graphics card can't output that many frames, it is completely wasted. For most 1440p and 4K gaming today, the real sweet spot is 120 to 165 Hz. It gives you a beautifully smooth motion without hammering your GPU. And if you're a competitive player, then sure, 1080p with 240Hz, 360Hz displays can give you that edge. But for most gamers, that kind of refresh rate is a complete overkill. And if you're ever seen those kind of horizontal lines that split the images mid-motion, that's what's called screen tearing. It happens when your frame rate and refresh rates don't match. And you can kind of fix that by enabling what's called adaptive sync, that's FreeSync on AMD and G-Sync on NVIDIA, and other sync technologies out there. It keeps the display in a perfect synchronization with your GPU, almost preventing that kind of tearing and stutter. There is a tiny bit of an input lag trade-off, but honestly, it's barely noticeable, unless you're playing that ultra competitive title. But in general, and specifically if you're running multiple monitors, try to keep your refresh rates similar. Mixing say a 60Hz and 165Hz can cause flicker or lag when moving between windows and so on. And if you want that extra stability, manually capping your FPS to your monitor's refresh rate, it will reduce the GPU strain and keeps things consistent. And also, if you're a content creator, guys, remember you're also limited by your capture card's limitations when it comes to these refresh rates and that sort of thing. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Now, when it comes to marketing, the term HDR gets abused to hell. But to just kind of put it in more clear context, guys, if a monitor says HDR 400, ignore it. That's fake HDR. Basically what it's saying is it accepts a HDR signal, but it's not bright enough to actually show it. Real HDR starts at HDR 600 or above. That's when you really see the difference. Brighter highlights, deeper shadows, and that natural, realistic lighting that makes content feel alive. Especially with mini LED monitors, they shine, and I mean literally, they can hit like 1000 nits or more, delivering a HDR performance in bright rooms. Crazy. And if you watch HDR movies or play HDR enabled games, ideally look for monitors that have support for both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. There are different formats, but both make a visible difference depending on what you watch or play. And the reason I say that is because certain content, say Netflix, only support Dolby Vision for some of their content and not HDR10. And then if you do not have that technology, you will not be able to benefit from it. Additionally, guys, brightness matters too. If your setup has a natural light or RGB lighting behind you, aim for at least 400 to 500 nits sustained brightness. OLEDs look best in darker rooms, while high-end IPS and mini LED panels can handle bright spaces much better. So as much as the technology matters, also the lighting and setup around you is as important as well. Now, here's my personal big aspect regarding choosing any monitor. The one that almost gets overlooked all the time, and that's screen finish. And there are two main types, glossy and matte. And if you ask a lot of people out there, go on Reddit, people always say go glossy because they look incredible. And they are not wrong, because glossy panels will give you vibrant colors, deeper blacks, and that showroom pop. But they reflect everything, and I mean everything. Lamps, windows, RGB, you see it all. Matte screens diffuses that light. You lose a bit of a contrast, but you gain usability. You can work or game in almost any lighting without distraction. And let me tell you this, trust me on this, unless you got full control over the lighting in your room, I would always go matte. And I learned that the hard way because during my streams, when I had these LEDs on behind me, the reflections, they drove me up the wall because when it came to dark games, guys, I will literally see my lights instead of the shadows. And swapping to matte monitor fixed that instantly. So remember, guys, again, if you got something like this, make sure you choose a matte monitor. Now, when it comes to connections, another one of the most overlooked but important parts for PC gaming and PC use in general, you want DisplayPort 1.4 or 2.1. They carry the bandwidth needed for the high refresh rate, HDR and 4K. And for consoles like PS5 and Xbox Series X, you need HDMI 2.1 for 4K at 124 Hz. Anything lower and you will be limited. And trust me, the amount of people I've seen people asking me, oh, why have I got a 4K screen and it's not running 4K? Is usually that's the cause of it. And don't cheap out on the cables either. Look for VESA certified DisplayPort or ultra high speed HDMI cables that got that certification next to them. Cheap ones usually have issues in terms of causing flicker or random signal drops. And for laptop users, guys, if your monitor has USB-C with DisplayPort and power delivery, they are amazing because one cable can handle your display, data, and charge your laptop. Super clean setup. And if you're running multiple monitors, guys, try to consider the number of connections that you got and avoid the adapters if possible. They can bottleneck signal quality or limit your refresh rates. If you absolutely have to, due to limitation of budget and so on, get a well-rated active adapters, rated for your resolution and refresh rates, or even higher. And definitely don't cheap out on them because, yeah, they will cause a lot of issues as well. Another one of the big topics or selection dilemmas are curved screens. And don't get me wrong, they can be amazing, giving you that incredible cinematic, almost IMAX feeling that you remember forever. But when they are used properly, and that's where the problem lies because most people don't actually have the right setup to get the full benefit. Because of how they are shaped, curved monitors will naturally take up more space. And to get the experience they're designed for, you have to sit at the right distance. Otherwise, if you're too close, the sides will feel stretched too far and the curve might as well not be there. The whole idea is that your eye and the edges of the screen form some sort of like a triangle, let's just say. And that's when it feels balanced, like the screen is wrapping around your vision. Now, the bigger or wider the screen is, the more space you'll need to make that work. For example, with a 34 or a 49-inch ultra-wide, you need roughly 3 feet of desk space to sit comfortably. And depending on your keyboard position or just generally how your room is laid out, that can be incredibly, and I mean incredibly tricky. And if you can't sit far enough back, that curves ends up working against you. It will distort edges and might even strain your eyes over time to a point where you get migraines and headaches. It is not pleasant. I've had it. That's why distance and setup matters more than people think it is. And I will always recommend anybody looking at a curved screen to consider before the spec, the setup and how they're going to be using it. Because if your desk isn't deep enough or your posture in general is off, you lose the whole point of having a curved screen. Now, there's also the element of aspect ratio, because that sort of ties right into this. With most monitors, they're 16.9. It's what kind of almost every console, game, and video are generally designed for. Now, when it comes to monitors that are curved, a lot of them often have 21 by 9 ultra wide, which gives you that extra side space for editing and racing games and so on. Or you have the option of 32 by 9, the super ultra wide setups that almost feel like two screens in one. Again, it can be great for productivity in terms of editing and so on, and simulation games, they can be incredible. But here's the problem. Not every software and not every game support them properly. So you might end up getting these stretched images or black bars, and they are not pleasant and they defeat the whole point of having a curved screen. There are curved 16 by 9 monitors as well, but the bend is usually so mild that it's more about style than immersion. So before you buy one, make sure, guys, first of all, you consider all these limitations, but also the space and the distance, because otherwise, if you're not covering those elements, it defeats the whole point. But when it comes to my personal opinion, to be honest, I would much rather spend that money, because they tend to be quite expensive, on getting a mini LED or better technology for the monitor itself, and maybe get a dual monitor setup. That will not only give you more flexibility, it will be much easier to move and kind of change in terms of your setup and so on. So you're not limited by your monitor, and you get the potentially a much better experience as well. Now, before you hit that buy button, make sure you check the warranty. This can literally save you hundreds later, because different brands have different pixel policies. Companies like Dell and LG will replace your monitor even for one dead pixel, while others won't act until there are 3 or more. So always read the fine print, even when it comes to Dell and LG, because they might change their policies. Especially if you're going to buy an OLED, make sure burn-in is covered. Many brands now include 2 to 3 years of burn-in protection on the normal use. And also, guys, leave those pixel refresher tools that comes with your monitor on. They can literally extend the life of your panel when it comes to OLEDs. Also, remember, think about the ergonomics. Height, tilt, swerve adjustments. Sound minor, right? But if you are at work for hours, they matter. Especially if you use your own arms and mount, make sure your monitor has VESA mount support. Not all of them do. So, guys, just remember, when you're choosing your next monitor, don't listen to the marketing noise. Just forget about them. Focus on what fits you. Look for the specifics, how you use it, where you're going to be using it, and what your system can actually handle, and look for the monitor that addresses those and gives you those specifics. And whatever you choose, check the warranty, ports, make sure it suits your space and lighting. I hope this video has helped, and if it has, don't forget to smash that like button and do drop your comments down below. Love to hear your setups, your questions, and don't worry guys, I will be doing more videos around more kind of details around some of the subjects that I discussed in this video, and for that and a lot more on how-to guides, free tools, streaming guides, and even tech thoughts, subscribe and ding that notifications. And until next time, take care and peace.